Welcome back to the And I Hate podcast, a forum to discuss and combat student hate. Today we have brought on Dr. Roy David, a parent in our school district with a son in middle school. At the beginning of this school year, Dr. David was featured on local and national news for calling out anti-Semitism in a history teacher's classroom. The teacher in question decorated her wall with a photo of Adolf Hitler, claiming he was a good leader despite the many atrocities he committed, especially against the Jewish community. It is important to address anti-Semitism and more broadly hate in classroom settings so that students have a safe and tolerant place to learn. So, Dr. David, thank you so much for being on the And I Hate podcast. Obviously, I didn't do you justice in my short introduction, so can you give us a brief biography of yourself and kind of a background of the situation that went on earlier this year?
Well, pleasure to join you here on the podcast. And so, yeah, I'm a plastic surgeon in the community, and I have now my second child who's attending Carmel Valley Middle School, Ethan, who's almost 13. And, one day Ethan came home from school and basically told me, hey, Dad, my teacher has a big picture of Hitler on the wall. And I thought he was joking. I didn't really believe him. And so I asked him to take a picture and show me. And sure enough, he did. And I couldn't believe what I was looking at. And the teacher basically had a wall of famous leaders like Winston Churchill and Gandhi and Martin Luther King, people who we respect and admire from history. And then right in the middle of that is Adolf Hitler. So right there, something was off. It just was not right. And so the next question you ask yourself is, okay, what is the context? Why does this person have a portrait of probably the worst person in the history of mankind on the wall here next to heroes? What's going on here? And, when you look at it, she had a little inspirational quote underneath each leader, and the whole thing was odd. So at that point, still trying to give her the benefit of the doubt, which the teacher probably does not deserve the benefit of the doubt at this point, but still gave it to her. And Ethan went back and asked her, basically told her, you have a portrait of Hitler on the wall. You're basically, and we're not learning about the Holocaust. We're not learning about World War II, but you have a picture of Hitler on the wall. When you do that, you're trivializing the Holocaust.
Yeah.
And, we figured when she heard that, it would, something would go off in her head and she'd realize what she's doing here and take it off the wall. But then she replied with, I guess you can call it her truth. It really gives you insight on what's going on in this teacher's head. And she told him, well, Hitler may have done some bad things. And that's just that statement is trivializing the Holocaust. He didn't do some bad things. He murdered 6 million men, women, and children brutally. So he didn't do some bad thing. Hitler may have done some bad things, but he had strong leadership qualities. And when Ethan told me that, I knew that's not something a 12-year-old can even make up. Those were her words, and she never denied it. So she literally told him Hitler may have done some bad things, but he had strong leadership qualities. And so we should put him on a wall of honor with Gandhi and Martin Luther King and learn about leadership skills from Adolf Hitler. So, in my opinion, this teacher, at that point, there's no benefit of the doubt. There's no, this teacher, she's just ignorant. She doesn't know what she's doing. That's not true. She's a history teacher. She went to college. She studied history. She knows what Hitler did, and yet she still did this. So at that point, in my opinion, this woman is an anti-Semite. And so basically, it looked to me like at this point, we have an anti-Semite teaching history class at Carmel Valley Middle School. And again, that's my opinion. So I shared that with the principal, and the principal seemed like she didn't really know how to handle it. And she didn't know if it was the right thing to go and take that picture off the wall. I told her, you need to march in there and take that picture off the wall right now. And she wouldn't do it. She didn't know if it was the right thing to do. And there you go. So the whole situation was escalating now from just a a rogue history teacher. Now we've got a principal who thinks maybe it's okay for Hitler's portrait to be on a wall of honor in a fifth grade or a seventh grade classroom. So it turned into kind of a bigger issue than at first I thought it was. And so at that point, we escalated to the school board. And while one of the trustees wanted immediate action and was really and I called for the teacher to be terminated. At that point, this woman needs to be fired. You can't have somebody who trivializes the Holocaust and in my opinion is an anti-Semite teaching young children. It's she's doing a lot of harm to these kids. But one of the trustees was wanting to take action, have the whole thing investigated, but the other trustees basically voted against doing anything. And unfortunately, now 6 months or several months later, that teacher is still there. She's still teaching kids, not my kid, because I took Ethan out of that class, and he's very happy with his new history teacher. But I feel sorry for those other kids. I don't think that teacher deserves to be there. So, this unfortunately still exists today, and we got to fight it whenever we see stuff like this.
Great. So, so I know you kind of answered this question in your little monologue, but what bothered you most about this incident? Because there was a lot of wrong in this Hitler incident.
There can be one person can be an idiot, and so as much as I was angry by what this teacher did, it bothered me more when it escalated to the principal, and the principal was not taking action. The principal did not remove the picture from the wall until after the Anti-Defamation League called her and told her it was wrong to have a picture of Hitler on the wall. She's a principal of a middle school. She should have known immediately it was wrong and taken off the wall. So I got to say that was the moment of biggest frustration for me. So for me, that was probably the worst part of it.
Yeah, I find it interesting that the Anti-Defamation League recognized that this was an act of hate and anti-Semitism, and the principal didn't. So what are ways that we can recognize hate, even if it is not outwardly aggressive or what we would conventionally consider a hate crime?
Well, one solution is education, and that's kind of the unfortunate thing is these children in that classroom have not learned about World War II yet. They don't know. Probably a lot of them don't know who Hitler was. They don't know about what the Holocaust was, and education about that should probably happen at this point. That this is recent world history, and it's very, very significant. So I think education would help, and maybe if more kids knew what Adolf Hitler did, maybe other kids would have spoken out as well, not just my son. So education can help, but it's also at the end of the day, it's up to the Jewish community needs to stand up for itself, a little bit more. Unfortunately, sometimes people don't want to speak out. But these things are not harmless. One day you got Hitler's picture hanging on the wall. The next day there may be a swastika in the bathroom or in the hallway. These things kind of escalate. So there really needs to be zero tolerance for anti-Semitism and any other form of hate. And you do have a good point, because anti-Semitism is one of those forms of hatred that it can be not very, very direct sometimes. Sometimes it can be subtle and be, just like sneaking a little picture of Hitler on the wall, something like that, or just kind of questioning the Holocaust. It may not be as obvious as, physical violence, but it's insidious and it's dangerous. So that's kind of what's a little bit unique about anti-Semitism, unfortunately. Other forms of hatred can sometimes be more overt, and so they're a little bit harder to get away with. But this sort of stuff we need to be aware of, and we need to address it when we see it.
Definitely. And I completely agree with what you're saying about education. A few months back, I actually read this shocking statistic that in some parts of the United States, less than 50% of people actually believe that the Holocaust happened. So given those, shocking statistics and the lack of advocacy for the Jewish community, how can people that are not members of the community advocate for Jewish people against anti-Semitism, especially in like school and classroom settings?
Without educating themselves, they may not even know, at the end of the day. But that's really the key. Educate yourself. Understand. What happened. Earlier in the past century. And listen, 6 million is a big number. That's the mother of all genocides. There's nothing really more horrific that happened in human history. And it didn't just happen to the Jewish community, it really happened to the world. You think about all the people who were murdered, think about how many of those people would have won Nobel Prizes or developed, who knows, maybe would have had a cure for cancer by now. So this was a horrible, horrible event that happened, to the Jewish people, but really happened to the whole world. And so, it really would be nice if we educated our kids, a little bit about what happened.
Definitely. I completely agree that education is a main problem. And you're right. A lot of kids don't actually learn about World War II until 8th grade or even, 10th grade in AP World History classes. So how can teachers have maybe uncomfortable conversations with their students about what actually happened? And how does this help students and make school a safer place for them?
Well, teachers, unfortunately, as you probably know, they can't just teach whatever they want. They have curriculums that are handed down, from the district level. So ultimately, the only thing we can really tell teachers like Mrs. Barry is, listen, if it's not in the curriculum, and if you're not going to give a true education about World War II and the Holocaust, you have no business even showing a picture of Adolf Hitler. You have no business even bringing up the subject of Hitler if you're not going to teach the context. So that would be one thing. But at the district level, that'd be a major shift. Hey, if we want to combat anti-Semitism at an early point, then we need to start teaching history. The relevant history as well, because you can't fight anti-Semitism if you're ignorant to the dangers of anti-Semitism. And so, I think maybe the curriculum needs to be changed, and maybe we need to start teaching, World War II and the Holocaust, even at the middle school level.
Yeah, definitely. That would be really productive. And I think that in the case of this specific teacher, perhaps her personal biases and prejudice against the Jewish community maybe impacted how she taught. And Sammy actually has a really interesting question about this.
Yeah, so how is hate perpetrated by a teacher or adult or just any role model in a school setting different from hate perpetrated by a student?
Well, hate perpetrated, when a history teacher is leading children to believe that Adolf Hitler was a good leader, that's leaving a much stronger impression on the minds of those 20 kids in that class, much stronger an impression than maybe one kid saying something. So teachers have a lot more responsibility, and something like what she did can cause much more damage than anything a child would say.
Definitely. Do you think that even the age of students can play a role in how fast these harmful messages are spread, especially since 7th grade students haven't learned about the Holocaust and World War II yet?
I'm sorry, your question is, would their age?
Yeah, does age play a role in how fast these students or how quickly these messages spread in classrooms?
I don't know. I don't know if their age is a difference. I mean, it could be that these kids, didn't really think about it deeply, given their age. But at the same time, this kind of almost like a subliminal message. Hey, Hitler, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Hitler, Gandhi, Martin Luther King. And if that's all these kids are taught about Hitler until they graduate from high school, what are they going to think the rest of their lives? No, Hitler wasn't that bad. He was a good leader. He was a strong leader, just like Martin Luther King. So when you give them that visual and that picture at a young age and nothing else, no other context, it can make a long-lasting difference, unfortunately. And the really unfortunate thing is no corrective action. Nobody went into that classroom and stood before those kids. And it probably should have been the principal of the school if she had the ability, go in there and explain to them, hey, this is why the picture was taken off the wall. I'm sorry you had to stare at his picture for 3 months or whatever it was. But here's the truth, and here's why it was taken off the wall. I think that should have been done, and that could have maybe helped those kids. At this point, it is what it is. Whatever damage was done is done. My son understood it was wrong, and he's no longer there. But I don't think the other kids ever realized it. It's kind of brushed under the rug in this case.
Yeah, that's really unfortunate. And honestly, I think that a lot more transparency from the adults involved would have helped the kids in that situation and helped them understand why the issue was as big as it was. So you talk about some of the authorities in the situation not helping immediately or not immediately taking the picture down. So why was there no action, and why is that especially frustrating?
You have to ask them. I mean, it's frustrating because it's frustrating, but why did they do nothing? I think it's a combination of the district is a little bit has to answer to the teachers union, and they can't it's hard for them to fire a teacher. But it doesn't matter. Sometimes things are hard, but you still got to do them. You got to do the right thing. So there's definitely a failure of will, probably on the part of the district, and definitely a failure on the part of the principal to grasp why this was wrong. I don't think she to this point understands why this was so wrong. What happened, and there was a rush to make excuses, and nobody took responsibility. There was no apology. Nobody stood before these kids and said, hey, we're sorry. This was wrong, and this is why. That action was not taken. So I think the school failed in this incident, unfortunately.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that the situation could have been handled a lot better in many different ways. First of all, never having the picture in the wall in the first place. But given that action was taken, what are things that the teacher, the principal, even the district as a whole could have done to make the situation better and made kids feel safe in their learning environment?
It would have been just that, just taking responsibility, acknowledging it, apologizing, and saying what they're going to do to avoid it in the future. But there's no corrective action. There was just excuses and, oh, we're sorry. Some people were offended, blah, trying to brush it under the rug. Oh, this was just a history lesson, when it wasn't. So basically whatever should have been done, they didn't do.
Yeah.
And that's, again, a lot of people were upset. People are starting to forget about it now. I don't think there's going to be another portrait of Hitler hung on the wall in that school, probably for years. But 5 years from now, 10 years from now, when we're not there anymore, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen because I don't think any real corrective action was taken, unfortunately.
Yeah, definitely. Just hearing about how the situation was handled is especially disheartening because it makes, I'm sure, everybody wonder, will this happen again? So Sammy actually had a really interesting question about this and how we can ensure that this doesn't happen again.
Okay, so how can we empower parents to recognize and speak out against hate? Because a lot of the like school district, because all of the stuff with the school district, it may intimidate people. So how can we empower them?
Well, the parents got to ask questions. They got to ask their kids what's going on in school, and make your kids feel comfortable, like Ethan was coming and telling me what was going on. You know, and hey, teachers, yeah, we place a lot of trust in them, but parents need to be involved. They need to be aware of the curriculum, and ideally, probably pay a visit to the classroom now and then, and take a look at what's hanging on the wall, even. You know.
Definitely. And it's great that Ethan felt comfortable enough to go to you about what was going on in that classroom. How can we empower other students to speak out against hate?
Mm, well, just encourage them. Give them. Parents need to give their kids the support and confidence to stand up and call out something wrong when they see it. That's the bottom line.
So overall, with both students and parents hopefully being able to speak out more about these issues in the future, how can speaking out about hate and even establishing better norms in schools help students and parents and even teachers as well?
Well, it's hopefully we won't have to speak out about it forever. I mean, hopefully at some point it just stops.
Yeah.
And I think right now, blatant racism, we don't really see much of that, and we're certainly not going to see that from the teachers in the school. It's more this kind of insidious, kind of under the table, veiled anti-Semitism, veiled racism, the subtle stuff.
Yeah.
Got to kind of watch out for more. And anti-Semitism has been around for over 2,000 years. Anti-Semitism is the longest hatred. It was the first hatred, and unfortunately, it's probably still the worst. And it, unfortunately, it is what it is.
Yeah. It's really unfortunate that a lot of the anti-Semitism and more broadly, I guess, hate that's going on is very veiled and less overt than it used to be. So, Sammy actually has a really interesting question about this.
Yes, I do. So, why is it important to speak out against anti-Semitism and more broadly, just hate in general? So, yeah.
Well, because it starts off with a picture on the wall, and then it ends up with a act of violence. Hatred doesn't just stop at a low level. So you don't speak out, or you don't do something when it's subtle, it's going to pick up steam, and it's going to turn into something bigger. Unfortunately, that's what history has taught us.
Yeah. With this issue with having Hitler on the wall and kind of idealizing him as a good leader, did you see this becoming a bigger, even potentially violent issue in the future?
Well, just like I said, it could. It starts subtle, and nobody says anything, nobody does anything. It's just going to pick up steam and get worse. Now, I don't know if this particular teacher was going to do anything worse. Maybe not. But like I said, you kindle a little flame of anti-Semitism or hatred, and it's gonna grow bigger and bigger. So we shouldn't tolerate it at all. And
Yeah.
hopefully, this turned into kind of a big deal, and even though the school doesn't seem to have taken any corrective action, or nobody's disciplined the teacher involved, nobody disciplined the principal. Hopefully, them just not wanting to be in the spotlight like we put them in for well over a month will make them all think twice before pulling it again. Guys,
Yeah.
thank you very much for doing this podcast. I think it's been very helpful, and hopefully some of your friends and will see it and learn from this incident, and we can hopefully stomp out all these forms of hatred. Would be
Yes.
great.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time and for being here today. All of this was very illuminating, and I hope that it'll make a difference.
Awesome. Me too. Thank you guys.